Welcome to A Pair of Bookends, the book club you can carry anywhere. I'm your host, Hannah MacDonald, and I'll be bookending the conversation with some of the most exciting voices from the bookish world. Welcome to another episode in our debut Spotlight series, where we shine a light on the freshest authors and their work. Today, the spotlight is on Loretta Rothschild and her debut novel, Finding Grace, which is out now and published by John Murray Press in the UK and is also out in the US. Her novel has been named as a Goodreads hottest debut of 2025 and is one of Jodie Picoult's favourite reads of the year. Here to chat all about it, welcome Loretta to A Pair of Bookends.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. I have been so excited to chat to you about this book. It has been my life the last few days and I've been obsessed with it, so I can't wait for us to dive into that. But before we get into your book, I do like to start by asking what you're currently reading.
Well, I just finished Wild Dark Shore, which I loved. And so I'm sort of oscillating between a book called The Sirens by Amelia Hart and a sort of collection of diaries by Helen Garner. So I literally just finished Wild Dark Shore. So it's such a good book that I sort of need something juicy to go on.
Yeah, for sure. I've heard so much about Helen Garner, but she came to the UK quite late, and I was constantly hearing about her work on like Bookstagram and seeing all the Australians saying like how incredible she was, and we only got, I think, her three of her novels. I think W&N published, I don't know, maybe it was a few years ago, and they got these gorgeous covers. But yeah, we'd not had her work before. I don't know how long her diaries have been in the UK, but certainly her novels I hadn't seen before. And I'm desperate to get to her work because I've heard so many great things. So
I haven't read any of her novels yet, but I definitely recommend the diaries. I think especially for, I'm writing my second book now, unbelievably. And, sometimes reading diaries is a kind of, it's a nice thing to dip in and out of, and very voicey, and quite a good way sometimes when you're looking for character in a new book to have a kind of unconscious dialogue between, someone and themselves. And it's really informative. And she's, you get a lot of things in there you'd never be able to get in a novel. I mean, her diaries are, look how big they are.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's huge. So, there's a lot that would not all be in a novel.
No, for sure.
Maybe a novel, but you wouldn't get the repetition, and things like that are actually what make it so interesting, because you think, oh, that really bothered her, or you can pick up on things that maybe she wouldn't even know.
I love that. I definitely need to pick that up. How do you find it dipping into different books? Are you quite good at that? Or like, because for me, I have to just read one book at a time, and I don't know if it's because I have the podcast and I like to give the one book my full attention and then interview the guest. So it's quite hard to dip in and out. But how do you find that?
I am guilty of about 10 books on the go.
Oh my God.
I'm so scared I'm going to miss out on something. And, sometimes, but I wouldn't say I would read 10 novels at once, but I would read a diaries. I would read fiction, non-fiction, and poet. Like, I have to have sort of around the house, there's like little areas that if I stop, I can just pick something up. And I really, I don't know whether it's sort of, bad concentration or some sort of, but I'm always looking at the corner of my eye when I'm reading the book I'm reading, because I think, what is that? What is that over there? Is that something? Because also I sort of realized this in the last maybe 5 years, that I really read differently now, that I kind of have written a lot more. I really dissect books as I go. So there's certain books that I'm really pulling apart as I'm reading them in like a very forensic but interested way.
Yeah.
And then there's other things that I can't take my eyes off and even look out to see what else is everyone's reading or what is on my bookshelf, because I'm so engrossed in it. But it's something that will later inform my work as opposed to imminently or straight away. And I don't know how I'm going to read all the books I need to read in my life. It's a problem. And my husband always says, you haven't finished a book in sort of in about 2 months. And I think, I know, but I've started 12.
I mean, I have huge amounts of respect for that, and it really upsets me when people bring up the fact that you'll never get to read every single book. I'm like, what do you mean?
Terrifying.
Don't tell me that. Don't want to hear that.
really scary. But it's definitely there are a lot of books I pick up and will start to read. And if I don't have, and I read quite broadly, I don't really like to read what everyone else is reading at the time. I get a bit nervous of that in case perhaps, we start to sound like each other, or
Yeah.
I want to look where no one else is looking. So it's definitely, reading Wild Duck Shore, for example, when it was, blowing up, was quite different for me. But I hid away from the noise, and I really just went on my own with it. And it will probably be a book I'll revisit based on the fact that it had such a hype, to kind of look at it at a later date and see if I feel differently about it after it was sort of not front and center.
Yeah, for sure. I would love to get into your writing journey. I love asking debut authors about this, and I'd love to find out what the journey has been like for you in terms of writing your debut novel and releasing it into the world. Obviously, we're recording this and it is less than a month before publication. So how are you feeling for one? And yeah, what has this experience been like for you?
It's been the most incredible experience. And that's probably, even simplifying it a little. I've learned so much in a short period of time about the publishing world. I feel extremely lucky that I have the editors I have in the US and in the UK. It's been there's been ups and there's been downs, but all of it has been incredibly informative. And actually, the things that might have gone a bit awry have actually been the things that have centered me and reminded me what I'm doing this for, and the fact that every day I get to sit at my computer, at my pad, and run with my imagination, which is the only thing that I wanted to do, was be able to do that. So the fact that I do that now, and people talk about finding grace, like she exists in the world, and it's not just me anymore, is such an incredible sort of feeling, but also an incredible experience. And I want to try and hold on to all of it. But it's quite surreal to think that maybe 5 or 6 years ago, longer than that, I had this idea, and now people are talking about Honor and Grace and Tom like they know them. It's just surreal and wonderful, and just an incredible way for it to end up. Like I always say, close friends of mine know that I think about writing, and I talk about writing or filmmaking or poetry, whatever it is, as being like the life of a writer is basically like being a stalk of rhubarb, of forced rhubarb. You're like in a dark shed with candlelight to guide you, and you have no idea if you're going to reach that light, but you fight for it, and you do your absolute best, but you don't know if you're going to end up in the compost or the crumble. And that is, for me, I have so much admiration for people that sit down and create something in the darkness of the rhubarb shed. So, and that weirdly kind of helps me, because I think if there's a tiny bit of light, then everything's fine. And if I can see it, that's all that matters at this moment. And you really have to go for it. You have to trust yourself and just believe that if you can see it, maybe someone else might see it.
Yeah, I love that analogy. I think that's
I know, I thought of it, and I was trying to explain it to my friend, and she's sort of saying, only you would think of this.
No, I love it so much, and I think that'll resonate with a lot of creatives. It certainly resonates with me as an actor and a writer, and you have to have that faith in yourself, because I think there's so much out there that could discourage you, and it's not guaranteed that you'll make it, whatever that might mean. That there's no guarantee of that, so you have to have that faith in yourself and that drive and dedication and passion for what you're doing to keep going, I think.
Totally.
Let's get into your book. I am so excited to chat about this, but first of all, could you tell the listeners what Finding Grace is about?
Oh, this is such a hard question, because it really is. And like my agent and my editors, we still discuss it. How do we talk about this book?
Because without spoilers.
Without spoilers. And it's really tough, but I'll give it a go. But what I have learned from this advanced reader experience is that a lot of people went into it knowing nothing, and they were so happy about it. So they can always look up the spoilers if they do want to know, but for the people that don't want to know, I'll keep it brief. I suppose Finding Grace is an improbable love story between two characters whose lives are upended by a shocking event. And there's a very big secret and a very big twist in the book. And I think that's as much as I can say without spoiling it. But I always say, read the first chapter, and if you don't like it, you don't don't have to buy it or read it, but give the first chapter a go. That's my best sales pitch. That's how I got my agent.
I am obsessed with that, and I think you described that so well without giving any spoilers away. And off the back of that, I will just say that this has undeniably one of the best opening chapters I have ever read, to the point where I read it sat in bed and my boyfriend came to bed a little bit after me, and I was like, stop what you're doing right now, like I need you to read this. And he was like, oh, like I'm just getting, and I was like, no, like please, can you just read this right now? And made him read the opening chapter. And then I took it into work the next day and made two of my colleagues read it. And I was like, please just read this. Like I need to see your reaction to this opening chapter, because I was just so completely blown away by it. It's incredible. What do you think makes a good opening chapter?
Oh, I think one tip I would give anyone creating anything, I think it's the same for film and TV and books, especially novels, is in the beginning of the book, that is your chance. It really is. And there are a million things that are distracting a person from reading your book. Mm-hmm. So the way I would put it, and this might not make sense to many, but in my head, it's like, if the action is at the dining table, don't walk me through the front door, past the loo, through the kitchen, sit me at the dining table, mm-hmm. and make me care. So whatever that is, whether it's, like I said this the other day to someone, but if my husband is sitting there in a restaurant with me and he says, oh, there's a really happy couple behind you chatting, eating their food, I'm really not going to turn around and be interested because nothing is happening. Yeah. If you told me the woman behind you, Loretta, has got her husband in a headlock, I'm going to turn around because something's happening. And it's like, you can do a lot with 10 pages, but you have to get to the point. Like, what are you saying? What do you need this reader to know immediately that is going to change the course of their experience? And I always knew with Finding Grace, I would open that book like that. There was never a doubt in my mind. I knew that would be the final sentence. I knew that would be the first chapter. I knew that would be the first sentence. It was all so clear to me. And when I would pitch the book, even just talk about it to friends, I would tell them the first chapter and they'd go, oh, that's an amazing idea. I'm like, that's not the idea. That's just the opening. And they go, oh, okay. Because it was like, it seems too dramatic. And they think, well, shouldn't you put that in the middle? And I'm like, this is absolutely not. This has to happen now. And, you need to start the story, and you can get to the routine, that all the things that one thinks they need to tell the reader, which really you don't, like what she ate and what time she got up. No one cares. They will care if something is happening. And I don't mean something like the end of my book. I mean a fight with your husband, a very, very clear want from the reader. I mean, Honor very clearly wants to have another child. She's I think that is why the first chapter is as effective as it is because we know what she wants, and there are obstacles in that path that stop her from getting what she wants. And that's really the most important thing when you're creating a story, is just put the brakes on achieving what you need your character to achieve all the time, as much as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to touch on this kind of all-encompassing need that she has for another child, and you do explore, fertility and adoption and the conversations around that, and IVF and all those things, and also people's unsolicited advice when it comes to exploring the different options that might appear to us. What drew you to writing about those topics?
I think I'm really interested in, as a storyteller, the kind of uncharted territory in storytelling. And because there's so many advancements in IVF and fertility technology, that there's really a lot of fertile ground for storytelling and secrets that are then go on to be revealed. So I was really it really pulled me in that you could tell a love story like Finding Grace in an original way because of fertility technology and its advancements. And, it hadn't been done before. So this storyline, this exact situation was just sort of buzzing in my imagination. And I just thought, what a secret to keep. And, that is very appealing to me. That's what keeps me awake at night, is finding the little nuggets in the 21st century that they still live within the old-fashioned fairy tale or love story. That's really what I'm interested interested in talking about and telling stories about.
Yeah, and I think when you've got a like strong, powerful female voice at the center of this book, it's really hard to write from a woman's perspective without exploring our want, or maybe, you know, our want to have children or to be child free, because both of those things will become an issue at some point in our life, and will become a conversation at some point in our life, and it will be something where other people might make comments about it that maybe love you and care about you, and also people that don't know you at all.
Absolutely.
It's something that a lot of people feel that they can comment on, and it's actually none of their business.
Yeah, and I think if there's something that I would say, you know, someone asked me the other day, what do you want people to take away from? And I never really set out for people to take things away in the sense that I didn't have an agenda. I just wanted to see if I could make my idea digestible and novel. And I think if one thing it might shine a light on is the way we talk about children, and the way we might not realize we're asking a question that is deeply offensive. It's not intentional. People aren't asking certain questions to provoke a horrible reaction in you, but you know, it's very much my generation's vernacular, and I've grown up around IVF. I've grown up around, to me, I know the language, I know what to say, what not to say, I know the sensitivities because I've lived them. But for somebody else who doesn't, you know, my mum, for example, would never ever want to offend anybody, but she doesn't understand, and actually, you know, she's never experienced IVF, so how would she understand? It's before you do it, you have no idea. And all your friends have done it, you have no idea what's going on. So I think it's something that in the very, very subtle way might say to someone, oh, I didn't know that. And when they might meet someone, or someone who's had a child, and in a different way to them, maybe they would say, oh, you know, I don't need to ask questions that wouldn't be asked to someone who, say, didn't do IVF or did carry their child. You know, we don't need to ask questions all the time. Do you know what I mean? About why, how, why, what happened? Because the result is the same. So let's look at the result. Let's, you know, enjoy the joy of children, and not kind of want to put them in a hole, or put them in a, you know, pigeonhole them, like put them in a place, because that's all just nonsense.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I think you explore parenting really beautifully, and the children in the book is going to be really hard too.
Good luck, Hannah. That's all I have to say. Figure out how to do it, let us know.
But the children in the book, they feel like, you know, like whole, full people. Does that make sense? You know, it's not, I feel like sometimes when people speak about children, they kind of, I mean, I can't say infantilize because they are children, but do you know what I mean? Like, they don't allow them to be like actual full human beings, which they are. And I just think you allow for these children in your book to be exactly that. And I'm describing this terribly, but I know what I'm trying to say. I just can't.
No, I get you. I think that they're not, that, you know, they're very much part of the story.
Yeah.
And I think because of the way the book is told, the narrator is somewhat unexpected narrator as the book moves on. She is a kind of great partner in this story, because she knows so much about what's going on. She has context that no other character has. And she also wanted those children more than anybody.
Yeah.
And for one reason or another, different outcomes come about. It equally is the way the book turns, and having her narrate it really, I think, thickened her drive and her love for those children. And you almost see them the way she sees them. And, you know, she's a great mum. So I think she really helped bring them alive.
For sure. Yeah, but I think, you know, it's so interesting because she is a great mom, and I think she often second guesses herself. And I always find it really interesting when women feel selfish to pursue their careers and their passions when they're mothers, because it feels like the expectation is that they should just be a mother. You know, the societal expectation is that they should just be a mother and not anything else. And I've spoken to other authors about this on the podcast, of that feeling, obviously I'm just speaking to writers on here, but that feeling of feeling selfish when you're leaving your children to write a book. And that is what Honna's doing. And she finds that really difficult. You're a mother yourself, aren't you?
Yes.
Have you had that experience when you're writing, or are you quite good at, you've got that support system, you're able to pursue your writing, and there's no kind of, you've not had that experience yourself.
There's a great quote by Margaret Drabble where she's asked, I think in the 70s, yeah, early 70s, when the interviewer says, a male interviewer says, you're a writer, you're a mother, you're a wife, what are you doing, basically? I'm sort of paraphrasing. And she answers very simply, which is, well, I can't do without any. And I feel like that. I can't do without any of those things. They are the most important things in the world to me. And I really feel lucky that I can do the mum thing, I can do the wife thing, I can do the writer thing. And I think she's a great example of doing it all.
That's very forward thinking for the 70s.
It's a really incredible interview on BBC that is so moving, and she's so brilliant and she's so clever. It's really worth watching because she was so ahead of her time in terms of her point of view. That really stuck with me, and it is that I simply cannot do without any.
I love that so much. I need to watch this interview. You said it was on the BBC.
Yeah, it's really, really good on the BBC in the I think 71 or 72.
Okay, I'll have to look that up. Let's make it easier for ourselves. There is a poem that's used throughout the book, and I don't think this will give any spoilers to speak about this poem, that holds a lot of significance for the characters. Could you tell the listeners what that poem is and how you first came across it?
Yeah, and the poem in the book is called Hymn to Beauty. It's a French poem by Baudelaire. I love Baudelaire, so he's on my desk. Those translations are so exquisite that I just wanted to spend time in those poems. I wanted an excuse to read his poetry, dissect it. And I didn't want, Honor is the protagonist in the book. She's the main character, I would say. She is half French, and, she studied French literature at school, and it just suited her. I love Baudelaire, but I'm not half French, and it was just it was so Honor. I can't explain it any other way, but once you start reading her, she has this sort of, she's a writer, so she sees the world, I guess how I see the world, which is like this camera that keeps on rolling. So everything she watches, everything she reads, she's digesting in a kind of storyteller's perspective. So it seemed to me that I had to have a part of her kind of literary essence in a way. And it could have been so pretentious, but because of her and because of how she met her husband, you see the lack of pretension as the story goes on. And I really did just want more of an excuse to read Baudelaire, read about Baudelaire. And I wanted there to be a little hint of darkness and edge to whichever poem that would be. And Hymn to Beauty is a kind of perfect example of that. It has everything. And I hold it so dear based on how informative it was for me. And I remember realizing, oh my gosh, that's what she needs to say on the CD.
It's a beautiful poem, and I'd love to ask you actually, because there's so many amazing cultural references throughout the book, and Honor has so much love for books and poetry and art. And, so do the people around her. And there's a couple of references that I picked out. It says that Honor's favourite book was Stoner by John Williams. There's the reference of Carrie Bradshaw's Walk-in Wardrobe as the reference for The Architects. There is Stevie Nicks playing, her child plays that from her iPod. Like I said, their love for art. Are these some of your favourite things, or are they hand-selected for your characters?
I love Stevie Nicks. I don't think there's many that don't. I love Stoner. It's a great book. But I think they're definitely things I've looked at or read, but Honor has such different preferences. We're so different that I guess maybe we meet in the middle with things we like, literary choices, our influences. So maybe, yes, I think that's a great question, because I suppose when I'm writing a character anyway, I'm looking for the differences, because not the similarities, because that's actually where the friction will sit for me writing them. So I think in a way, maybe those literary choices, those cultural references are things that I knew I liked. So we could meet and talk about those. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
No, absolutely.
So I think I definitely, I love Kusama. I really think that she's one of the most important artists, without a doubt, of our time. And, I like the opportunity. I think as well, if you're interested in something, when you go to explore it, I started exploring Kusama much more when I wanted to use her in the book. and reading about her life and how she came about and how so many of her things were stolen from her from other artists. I want to know everything, and it's a sort of blessing and a curse, but there is so much depth once you start digging. And if you have just the tiniest kernel of interest or curiosity, you're just away. I can be gone for weeks. So I think having those original things be something I like definitely speeds up the process.
Yeah.
And it gets me very in the zone if I'm ever not in the zone.
I think it really helps to flesh out your characters, doesn't it? By
Yeah.
knowing the kind of books they'd be reading, whether they read at all, what kind of food do they enjoy, what wine are they drinking, if they're drinking wine at all. This is so
It's a game changer. And I had this the other day. I was reading a script for a friend, and he had this female character, and she was so underwritten. And I'm sort of reading it and thinking, this woman could literally be anyone in the world. And I sort of slightly irritated me. So I rang him up and I said, what is this? This is, and he said, well, I know. It's, I am going to get better. She is going to be improved. I promise, but I'm just da, 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 da. And I said, I don't know how she answers the phone. I don't know what her notepads look like. I don't know what perfume she wears. I don't know this. And he going, oh, yeah, no, I don't either. And I said, that's my point. I said, I don't need to know, but I know you don't know.
Yes.
So it's like, how does she answer the phone? Like, this is, I have a sort of, it's one of the oldest things in the world that people say, but the idea of showing someone something as opposed to telling them is so much more effective because, and it's sort of talked about all the time, but really it's often forgotten in things that don't work. And actually reading, when something really, really clicks with you, it's just because you've just been shown everything you need and you're not spoon-fed information. If someone tells me something as opposed to shows me what happened, I'm much more interested in seeing the whole thing play out as opposed to just one line about it. It's probably doesn't make any sense, but
no, it does.
In my head, I'm always like, okay, so what does it look like?
Yeah.
I don't like, how am I going to make this? Well, how does this manifest itself? And it's, I want to scrape away, definitely the more I've written, the more people I've worked with, like the more workshops I've done, the more I listen to people, the more I listen to other writers. I've realized that working out how to show, and it doesn't mean big performative things. It means like, it sounds so silly, but the best way I can describe it is I don't like using adverbs at the end. She said sweetly.
Yes.
Okay. I won't do that in my work because I think if the dialogue is not sweet, that's a problem. I should know it sweetly by the dialogue or whatever I've said before and after. So that's my kind of visual explanation for show, don't tell.
Yeah.
Just get it in there. Don't tell me afterwards that she was upset. I should know she's upset because she said something that informed me she was upset. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. You write dialogue really well, and it tells us so much about the characters. And dialogue is really important to me. I think as an actor, I'm always looking for dialogue and great dialogue. And as I was reading this book, I was like, I want this to be adapted. I want to be in this. It's really, it's really great dialogue, and it's hard to get right. I think, there's that advice of you need to read your work out loud. You need to read your dialogue out loud to know whether it's real or not, to know if it sounds right coming out.
And you have to ask yourself, like whenever I'm writing, you're trusting yourself before you go and show people and have conversations with editors and agents and mentors. And that's really important to have people around you because they are, someone gives you feedback or notes, like they really love you.
Yeah.
And if someone sends you 10 pages of notes, don't think, oh no, think, oh my gosh, look how much I now know that I didn't know. Yeah. And also, I love notes. I mean, I think that it's the best thing you can do is go and ask someone you admire or you trust for help, and they actually give it to you. That is a gift. Find people like that. Ask questions, ask them again. Just really find the people in your life that get you, that get it, that get what you're trying to do, and you will write a better book. There's no doubt about it. Speaking about dialogue, when you're doing your first draft or whatever, the dialogue isn't going to be perfect because you won't know everything about those characters yet. But as time goes on, you'll really get to know them. And if I always sit and ask myself, would she say that? And I can actually have that conversation with myself. Would she say it like that? Am I just having an off day? Am I tired? If I write this in the morning, she would say it differently. How many coffees has she had? Where was she before she said that? Not on the page, but mentally. The character that you're writing from the perspective of is not the most important. They are all as important. And I have to know what everyone everyone is doing before they say anything. And it's extremely, it can seem like, do I need to do that? You definitely need to do that. And, especially with Colette in the book, she's a character that I never get in the head of on the page, but, I have a deep connection with her. And she's a mother that my mother is the complete opposite to Colette, but I get Colette. I know she's in pain. So every sentence that she said had days, hours, hundreds of hours behind it to make sure that everything I needed to convey about that character in the limited time I had her was doing it and on the train and just charging towards the arc that I needed to create for her, because every sentence is an opportunity that you can't ever think, oh, she's just responding to a question.
Yeah.
No one's ever just responding to a question.
No, definitely not. I love hearing about all these little details, and I loved that Honor leaves coffee cups scattered around the house. I think that's it. Was it Honor? It was Honor,
Yes,
wasn't it?
no, that is totally Honor. She just, she's in her own world. She doesn't see them, she just drinks them and then leaves them, and that's very her.
I think it's such a great detail, and that one detail can tell you so much about a person. I remember my nana told me that her dad used to have a cigarette lit in every room, and
Fabulous.
And I was like,
it's
such a good detail. But I was like, my nana just kind of said that really blasé, and I was like, that is, like, I'm stealing that. I want to use that.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
that is absolutely amazing. That is actually one of the most, you have to use that. And I'm in awe of that. That is the most genius. That's a great lesson.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with it. I don't think I should be thinking about everybody as character details, but I will absolutely be stealing bits and pieces like you do. I want to ask you, before I round off asking for recommendations, there is obviously a big theme in the book, which is grief. It plays a huge role in the book, and it's dangerous territory to speak about grief and loss, but there are the people that hold you together, and support systems and friendship appears in so many ways in the book, whether that be the Sunday Blues Club, which I'm not going to go into detail about, or the ones that were there all along. What inspired these friendships in the book?
I think that in writing this book, I learned that grief and love are co-pilots.
Yes.
That was always at the back of my mind. They both drive characters in certain ways that can really throw a character's decisions. So when I was thinking about, the support systems around these characters when these things happened, it was, how do I show that these characters are doing things out of the ordinary? And your friends and your family are the people that say, you're being a bit weird, you're being a bit off, what's going on? And I think that they all have their roles, and they inform so much of the book by the support they give, the truths they give. And I think if I was going to say that, I'm so lucky to have great friends and great family, and, especially my sister, my sister is the person that, knows me so well. And if something goes wrong, I will be speaking to her, and she will be speaking from a place that loves me, but also knows me. Mm-hmm. So if you have that, you can kind of, ups and downs are slightly easier to handle.
Yeah, definitely. I could speak to you about this book all day. Now, you have said that you have a keen interest in telling tangled modern love stories, which I love. But what are the writers or books that have ignited this passion for you?
That's a great question. I am a sucker for a love story. And, I think that so many books, people don't fully realize they're reading a kind of classic love story. They think that love stories are something that you find for 99p at the airport, and that's just not true. No. Pretty much every story is a love story, whether it's platonic or family or, romantic. So I'm a huge Jane Austen fan, and I love I'm going to say all the ones because those are the original, Charlotte Bronte. And more modern, I get so nervous of saying ones because it's almost without context, someone can go, what? But, I'm not afraid of a story with a bit of darkness to it, In literary fiction, I really like Max Porter, who wrote it. You know, grief is a thing with feathers, I'm sure you know. But I oscillate all the time. And I just, with anything I read, you know, a very, very close mentor of mine always says, look for the love. And if you look for the love, you're going to find it in any book. So read widely. So, but also read the classics over and over again. Read Pride and Prejudice, you know, over and over and over again. It's a perfect love story. So yeah.
It's become very clear throughout this chat how much you read and how widely you read. And I think that's a really important lesson for both readers and writers. Finally, I want to ask, what is next for you?
So I am writing my second book. St. Martin's Press are my publisher in the US. My editor is Sarah Canton, and I have a 2-book deal in the States.
Amazing.
So I'm writing my second book. Sarah is my editor as well on that. Thank goodness. She's just the most incredible person in the world. And it's a different story. It's not a follow-on, but it definitely has my DNA all over it. It's very tangled. It's morally ambiguous. It's twisty, but it's it's definitely me. So
I can't wait. I cannot wait to read more of your work. I was so sad when I closed the final page of this book because I had so much fun with it. What is a recommendation that you would like to leave the listeners with?
Ooh, I think that's a good one. I think it's not a book, but it's a film.
Great.
But thinking about first chapters and rules about getting to the point. There is a French film called The Untouchables, which is, I think it's 2013, 2014, which has one of the best opening scenes, I think, of all time. And I learned a lot from that film about how you get someone's attention. So if you're at the beginning of writing your first book or anything, even if you're at the end of it, that would be a film I recommend very, very strongly. It changed my whole perspective on openings for sure.
Wow, I need to watch this. I hadn't heard
it's
of it.
It's a great film. Great film. And I always say to people, because my sister was like, oh, I don't want to watch something with subtitles, I'm so tired. And I was like, just watch 5 minutes. And if you don't like it, we can turn it off. And she's like, fine. And we put it on and she was just obsessed after 5 minutes. And it was a rule I say about my own book, which is just give me 5 minutes. And if you don't like it, you can walk out. So it really did. That's how big of an influence it had. I mean, I'm using the same shtick.
I need to watch this. Thank you so much, Loretta. It's been an absolute joy chatting to you today, and I absolutely love this book. And for our listeners, as we've said, Finding Grace is out now in the UK and the US. Go grab yourselves a copy. I'm going to pop a link in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. You can follow us at A Pair of Bookends Pod on Instagram and at A Pair of Bookends on Twitter and TikTok. Where can the listeners find you online, Loretta?
Oh, I'm on Instagram.
Amazing.
And I'm on TikTok.
Amazing.
Never thought I'd say that, but
me too.
Here I am.
Me too. I'll be popping links to those in the show notes. But lastly, thank you once again, Loretta, and thank you, listeners, for listening. Bye.